everyone, and welcome to our special Saturday edition of Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and I'm joined by Minnesota Vikings Game Day Radio color analyst Pete Bercich. Hey, Pete, welcome back from the Econo Lodge in the five-star dining in the metropolis of Green Bay.
I know. I've been there. I don't know how many times. I've been to Appleton. We go to Appleton because there's no hotel in Green Bay that's big enough for us to stay in. Appleton's a good 40-minute ride. The only hotel big enough in Green Bay to hold a team has a casino in it, and the NFL will not allow a team to stay where there's a casino. So everybody's forced to stay out there. So it's an interesting trip. No question about it.
Well, if there was ever a game we'd rather forget about than talk about, it's a Thursday night contest at Lambeau Field. But we got to dissect a night that just really went all wrong. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we talked about it last week with these Thursday games, and they're just not competitive. They're divisional games, which should be competitive. You'd think they'd be competitive, but these young players so early in the season having such a short week. Injuries have been a big factor. And back in the day, you used to have them on Thanksgiving Day, and that's later in the season when you have a better grasp of the game plan and everything else. And like I said, the NFL needs to look really hard because these sponsors have paid good money to advertise on these Thursday games. They have to be disappointed with the outcomes.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I was really surprised. I don't know if you saw this, but the game actually got a 10.6 rating, which is kind of in line with the number one sitcom, Big Bang Theory. I mean, it makes you wonder, will the NFL really make changes if people are still tuning in?
Well, yeah. That's the problem. If they're still tuning in, I don't know if they will or not. I think they'll just keep their fingers crossed that the games will get more competitive, and I think the ratings are due to the matchups. I mean, the bad matchups are the ones that are going to England, unfortunately for them, but they just want to see American football. And they've addressed it because originally these Thursday night games were games that no one really had any interest in. Two teams from different divisions in different areas, but now they've made them all pretty much division contests, at least so far. So that'll, when the Redskins play Dallas, that's a good game. When the Vikings play the Packers, it's a good game. Normally when Atlanta plays Tampa Bay, it ends up being a good game. But, I think the only reason why they haven't been is because it's a short week too early in the season, and yeah, people are still watching, and if that's the case, then the NFL probably won't change anything. But they have to be concerned because you hear rumbling. I mean, people are getting kind of tired of turning on a game in the middle of the second quarter and having them already be over. They just turn them off and move on.
Yeah, well, the short week is part of the problem, and we'll get to the quarterback situation in Minnesota in a minute. But what caused this entire Viking team to come out and appear as if they'd never played football before?
The thing I think that's most disappointing is just, from a physical standpoint, Green Bay controlled the line of scrimmage offensively and defensively. And Green Bay is not that physical of a team. They really aren't. You look at teams that played them before, how well everybody's run the ball against them. They've always kind of been more of a finesse team. And, to have them come out and just run the ball up and down the field on us, that's disappointing.
And it's funny because with the defense is they started out the game by forcing a 3-and-out. And then for, about a quarter and a half to start the game, they looked incapable of stopping anything. And I'm curious, from what you saw from the press box, what's going on with the defensive line where they seem to leave these gaping holes for runners and they just can't seem to generate a lot of pass rush without a fifth blitzer?
No, and you're right. And that's, in the interior of the defensive line, Sharif Floyd and Linval Joseph, those guys, I think, had a rough night. Linval, there were many plays where I saw him 4 yards back behind the line of scrimmage, and that's just not normally him. The week before against Atlanta, he played fantastic. And, I don't know if it was a short rest or what it was, but he's done it before, so he had to have been feeling a little under the weather or something. Sharif Floyd, I don't know. When you see the guards getting up to the second level and getting them the linebackers immediately, and I mean just from the snap of the football, then the defensive lineman has room there to replace and get in their gap, and that just was not happening. So that's, like I said, that's the disappointing part. Eddie Lacy has struggled this entire season, moving the ball, fumbling the ball, those kinds of things, and they got healthy on us in a hurry. That running game got better in a hurry, and I think it was more to do with what we didn't do than what they did. Because by no means it wasn't a gotcha schematically or anything like that. They just outwilled us at the line of scrimmage, and that's never good.
No, yesterday Brian Robinson spoke about some of the players, especially on defense. They appeared to give up at halftime, and there was way too much freelancing going on the defense. Are you surprised to hear that some players were mailing it in by halftime? And from what you saw, what freelancing is Brian talking about?
Well, you had, like you said in the beginning of the game, he had a couple 3-and-outs and things were going all right, and then they put up 2 touchdown drives in a row, and then things kind of calmed down again. And so, looking at 14-0, and you're thinking, well, if we can get a touchdown and 14-7 at halftime, we're still in this game. And, then the interception started. And I think once the interception started, that really took the wind out of the sails. I mean, when you score on defense, you win 90% of the time. And, then guys start pressing because they realize that they have to get turnovers, and then guys start doing too much instead of just their job. And, that becomes a big problem. So freelancing is lack of gap control, lack of guys being where they're supposed to be, and sometimes trying to do too much. And it has a snowball effect. And, that's the discipline that you lose when the scoreboard gets lopsided. Because you knew Green Bay was going to run the ball. You know what I mean? It wasn't like there was any mystery in what they were trying to do or what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And to still not be able to slow them down or stop them consistently, that's very frustrating.
Well, you talked about the offense, and you got to the point where you got a couple of interceptions, but can a defense be deflated to the point where their effort diminishes because they feel the offense isn't capable?
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger problem. I mean, I've seen that happen to teams before where you get out there, the offense has been struggling week in and week out, and you start out a game and start out with an interception or a thing, and then everybody kind of just, they go, here we go again. That's a huge problem because on defense or on offense, you can't control what the other side of the ball does. You just have to go out and do your job. You'll see that more on teams that 10 weeks into the season are 2-8, teams that are already out of it. And then that kind of complacency will kind of sneak in, and it's hard to win in the NFL. And when teams have an excuse to lose, they'll do so. And I worried about that too with the Vikings, with Adrian Peterson being gone. And you sit there and you're like, oh, there goes our best offensive weapon. Now no one's going to blame us if we stink. But they came out and took it to Atlanta. And that's the other thing that's crazy too, is that there's been wins and losses, but they've all been pretty lopsided. The wins have been pretty big, and the losses have been pretty big too. Mm-hmm. But all the losses that they've had the one thing's been in common, and that's teams scoring on defense or special teams. Interceptions for touchdowns or interceptions down to the one, blocked field goals. I mean, those are the things that have really pushed them over the edge in the last 2 losses.
Yeah, well, you get down on the field, you see this team before the game, a nice miserable rainstorm you were watching, but did you sense disaster coming in this game based on the mood and performance that you saw in warm-ups?
No, you can't. I mean, I had been in locker rooms where it was flat, and you were thinking to yourself, this is going to be a long day, and you go out there and you play your ass off, and then there's other times where everybody's fired up, and then you go out there and get your ass handed to you. I mean, it's different than a college. You get a college team that plays a team that they should beat, and they go out there and they're flat. I mean, that happens in college, but in the NFL, it's just too hard to tell.
Yeah, well, we continue to have one thing that's pretty consistent with the wins and the losses this year. We still have trouble getting off the field on 3rd and long situations. And, Pete, I'm wondering, how can we solve the problem of the stupid mistakes and penalties we're seeing on those 3rd down situations?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, that's something that they still have to work on. I mean, I look at the play of Captain Munnerlyn, Josh Robinson, and Xavier Rhodes, and those, obviously Captain's a new addition, but for Josh Robinson and Xavier Rhodes, those 2 guys have improved greatly. Mm-hmm. I really thought that position might be a bit of a liability going into the season, and right now on defense, I think that position's playing very well. I think we've got half of our safeties, playing very well. Usually you look to the back end on 3rd down, but when Green Bay ran the ball a little bit on 3rd down too, and so it's a focus, and I think if they can set themselves up a little better on 1st and 2nd down, they'll be in better positions on 3rd down. It's hard to blitz Rodgers, and it's hard to blitz him consistently because he's just so quick and knows what to do with the football.
You mentioned, half the safeties are playing well. What's going on with Robert Blanton?
I don't know. It's frustrating, because you see him taking some bad. He's in positions to make, and he's taking some bad angles, and he's doing some other things, and I don't know. The physicality of the position is just not there. You look at Harrison Smith out there gimping around, and he's running around making plays. And, when he's tackling people, they go down. He reads, recognizes, and then he's like shot out of a cannon. He just goes and makes plays, and Blanton's just not doing that. So that's a position of concern right now for sure. I don't know. I mean, he missed a lot of camp. He was injured in camp, and that comes back to get you. Because if you don't build that base, you may not feel as good during the regular season. You just hope that you can get a little improvement out of him week to week, but we haven't quite seen that.
He may be one of the responses you give me this next question, and you saw Mike Zimmer's press conference yesterday. The demeanor he had can't be described as anything other than pissed. And he said, I may have to hurt some feelings next week. And Pete, what did he mean by that? Is he about to make some changes in the defensive starting lineup? And if he is, who would you think would be the person or the people he's looking at?
Well, I mean, I think the two guys that defensively, in my opinion, this is again my opinion, that he'd be looking at would be Blanton and Sherels Floyd. Mm-hmm. I think Shamar Stephen and Johnson have both played very well. When those guys were in there, when they got their series, they both played very well. They didn't have as many snaps on them the weekend before, and the freshness was a factor. But I think Floyd's one guy he's on notice, and I think Blanton is the other guy. I mean, those two are the guys that I think he's looking at and is probably most concerned about.
You mentioned the safety position. I've actually heard some rumors that there's a possibility they may try to convert Marcus Sherels to a safety. Do you see him fitting there?
Yeah, if you're not requiring him to be an in-the-paint kind of safety, a guy that's got to come down in the box a lot, then yeah, I can see that because he can play the middle of the field. He's a tough kid. We've seen that out of him. The only thing he does is what you tell him to do. But yeah, there'll be some challenges in tackling because as safeties go, that you're required to hold an edge and hold contain and do some other things. And he's just not that big. So could he do it for a week? Yeah, I think so. Can he do it for consistently throughout the season? That's a bit of a tough call. But I do know this is that Sherels will give you everything that he possibly has, and I think right now that's what Zimmer's looking for. He's just looking for guys that are willing to go out there and even if they're limited in some way, as a coach, that's okay. If you know where a guy is limited and the guy's consistent, you can help not put him in game plan to not put him in positions where he could be compromised. But when you have a guy that plays really well one week and then can't do the same things the next week, then you're really stuck because you don't know. I mean, how do you game plan for that? Because one week when you put him in a certain spot, he performs, and then next week you put him in the same spot and he doesn't. That's harder to get to figure out and to deal with than a guy who's at least consistent and has some holes in his game.
Yeah, well, I hate to do it. We have to turn to the offense, and it really makes a little sense, Pete, to talk about Christian Ponder's confidence problems. And frankly, when I think of him, it reminds me of the old saying that they say about kids is when they're at the carnival, if they're frightened on the ground, they're going to be panicked in the air. And, Ponder looked like he was in full tilt-a-whirl panic when he drops for a pass. But my real question about him is, what keeps this staff from releasing him today? I can't imagine we'd be worse off with almost anybody out there backing up Teddy Bridgewater.
I think in some ways you go, well, a third-string quarterback, you're not going to expect too much out of him, but he's not a normal third-string quarterback. He's a guy that's led this team to a playoff run, a few years ago, and so I don't know. You would think he could go out and just not have anything to lose and just try to make some plays and do those things, but it just didn't look that way. So, I don't know. It's a mystery to me. It's not his fault that he was drafted 12 and overall and all those other things. And, the pressure is not there. He had nothing to lose. But at the same time, he looked rusty or, a lot of throws consistently. He was throwing balls behind guys. Those were a couple that ended up getting picked off. And, yeah, it's a mystery to me. I mean, it is a mystery to me. And he hurt himself in that game as far as his future because, who's going to watch that game and think, well, he could be a solid backup. I mean, it's going to be a challenge for him to find a job, I think, next year.
Well, I'll tell you, we had Chandler Harnish for about 6.5 minutes on the roster, but you've released him already. And that means that, it's either Ponder or McLeod BethelThompson. If it were you, who would you have backing up Bridgewater against Detroit?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think some of it may have to do, too, with the team. I mean, how are the guys reacting? Or how are they going to feel when number 7 jogs back on the field? I think McLeod BethelThompson has a great opportunity. He's back again, and you almost would sit there and say, hey, give that kid a shot because of what you might get out of Ponder. I mean, he looked on Thursday night, just like he did when he was just handing the ball off against Atlanta. Not disinterested or bored, but just nothing, just blah. It's like, go out there and have some fun. Go out there and you have nothing to lose, man. Just play the game. And he's the kind of guy that makes plays with his legs, and he didn't even do that against Green Bay, which was disappointing. I figured that they put him in position to run the football a little bit, do some things physically, because he can do those. And if you remember, in years past, it seemed like early on in the game when he made some plays with his legs, then that translated into confidence, and he played better overall. But he just never got going at all. And his passer rating in the third quarter he was flirting with single digits.
Oh yeah,
and that's embarrassing. I mean, that's just embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, as brutal as he was to watch, it also looked like the offensive line was leaking like a sieve. And I'm curious, from what you saw, higher up on the field, how many of those sacks were the fault of the line? Obviously, Green Bay had 6 sacks, as opposed to Christian not having a good feel in the pocket and running into those sacks.
I think early on, some of them had to do with the line. Again, I think outside of Sullivan, I didn't see anybody else really standing out. You know what I mean? I think when you look and you see, Lodeholt had a play or two, Dukas had a play or two, Johnson had a play or two, Khalil had a play. Now, you're looking at 4. That's 8-10 plays right there. You know what I mean? You just can't have a breakdown here, a breakdown there, consistently like they did. And again, it's another position where, Green Bay has a defensive end, and his last name's Daniel, 76. That guy was just running around like a bull in a china shop. He was just being physical. But Troy Guion had a sack and a half, and he almost was benched because he's just been getting destroyed. So, it's amazing how in the course of a game, if one guy needs to have a good game and he goes out and does, it changes an entire defense. And Guion did that. And so when you're out there and you see a guy like Troy Guion, who's consistently struggled, have, a sack and a half, then you're like, what the hell, what's going on?
Yeah.
How does he bounce back against us? I mean, it's, that's one of those things where the guy's struggling. You got to let him know right from the beginning it's not going to be his day. And, they let Troy hang in there and play well. And that's just not good. A lot of that pain is self-inflicted.
Yeah, well, what I didn't understand, Pete, on Thursday night, Norv tends to have success with a guy like the quicker Jerick McKinnon against the Falcons, and then he all but eliminated him from the game plan the other night. Was that based on the rain, or why would we see so little of McKinnon the other night?
I think you saw a little bit more of him later in the game. And I think the other thing that you see is Matt Asiata is, he was an undrafted guy, and he'll get to that second level, but he's not going to get you much more than that. And I mean, for McKinnon, so much of what he did was just a fresh set of legs later in the game, and was able to get out there and make things happen. And he just didn't do it. Another guy just, not that he didn't have any juice, but when he was out there, if your offensive line is demoralized or your offensive line is struggling mightily like they were, then I don't care who you put back there. It's going to be a long night. So, I don't know if he's good enough yet to rely on. I don't know if he's good enough yet to be the bell cow. Mm-hmm. But it was, they put him in there trying to get a little juice later in the game, and nothing came of it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I've got one that I want to pitch to you that actually your broadcast partner, Paul Allen, talked about yesterday on KFAN, and he said he asked Norv Turner why we weren't seeing more of Cordarrelle Patterson on runs and sweeps, and Turner responded by saying that every time he ran a fake from the jet sweep formation, 3 guys were following Patterson, and that's fair enough, but I wondered from your perspective, wouldn't that mean that some other receiver is either single covered or left completely uncovered?
Absolutely. You're right. Okay. Cordarrelle is struggling to get off the ball when they jam him. That was something that we talked about his evolution, and I've said many times that he needs to be as a starting receiver. A kickoff return is tough, but I think with the way things are going, it's like that's his biggest contribution. He just, for some reason, that step you're waiting for him to take as a wide receiver just kind of isn't there. I mean, Castle brought a lot of that out of him. Mm-hmm. We didn't see much of it with Teddy, and then with Christian out there, obviously we didn't see any of it. So I don't know. He's got to progress as a receiver a little bit here. His hip injury kind of came in late, which was disappointing. Just because when you have a game like that, you would hope that the leaders of that team would take over and start fighting. And then when, a key guy like that gets a hip injury, you look out there and you got Greg Jennings and Jarius Wright, and, that's about it. Thielen's out there trying to make plays, and I can't remember his name, number 12. He caught his first NFL reception. I mean,
Charles Johnson.
Yeah, Charles, you're putting guys out there that, that never even played. That's what you have to depend on. And the guys that you would hope would step up and make something happen, dig deep, do those things, they're not there. Rudolph's not there. Patterson wasn't there. I mean, the cupboards were bare.
Well, you talk about him struggling to beat jams at the line of scrimmage. How do you beat that if you're a receiver? What do you do?
It's technique and just being a little bit savvy, learning your opponent, learning who you're going up against. It becomes almost like, D linemen are going against an offensive lineman. They study them. I mean, they study their stance and they study their technique and they study what moves do they struggle with, all those kinds of things. And as a wide receiver, you kind of have to do the same thing as well. I mean, you have to really study your opponent and say, when this guy rolls up and tries to jam me, he struggles with this kind of a move or that kind of a move, or, get physical with them, off the line of scrimmage to create some space. I mean, that's something that needs to be there. And it ends up being as much of a technique and mental thing as it is anything else. And we know from a physical standpoint that Cordarrelle can, he's gifted enough to do whatever. I mean, it's not a limit on his physical ability.
Yeah.
So what is it? Why is he continuing to struggle? I mean, I know George Stewart very well. He's a very, very good coach. He's just going to have to learn, how to beat press coverage.
We talk about him being a good decoy when he's running. It draws attention. Why wouldn't they line Patterson up as a tailback in the backfield and then play action to him and go deep to Jennings or Wright?
Well, the thing is that Patterson, when he has been a running threat, he sometimes lines up the true running back, and they do some things, and they did that early. They had I think it was the second game of the year against, I think it was New England, that they had a fake sweep to him. They tried to, hit the tight end on the backside and those kinds of things. And you would think that they could, but, you only saw Cordarrelle, you only seen him in the backfield a couple times.
Right.
You haven't seen him consistently enough where you maybe would feel comfortable doing that, or, it's always that this play was successful, so what's, they're gonna game plan to stop it. What can we do off of it? And, you just haven't seen him back there consistently enough. With Petty back there, it's a different offense. Yeah. And that kind of play didn't really fit, I don't think.
Well, maybe what we do is we put somebody in a number 28 jersey, put him back there, and maybe we can play action to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
exactly. I don't know if that would fool anybody, but it'd be nice to see.
Absolutely. Well, as we close it today, Pete, give us something to be optimistic about for next week. Why do you think we will be better positioned to beat a really good Detroit Lion team?
I think with a little bit of time off, it's going to help these guys recover a little bit. And again, Teddy back is going to make a difference. We're going to face a pretty good team. I mean, the Lions in the passing game, they're pretty one-dimensional. I mean, Calvin Johnson's pretty much it, and stopping him for consistently for an entire game is damn near impossible to do. It's just beat you with Reggie Bush and their running backs, Joyce Bell and the rest of them. Even against Green Bay, they put multiple tight ends in. They really ran the ball. They really tried to be physical, and they're going to look at the Vikings offense and say, well, we don't need to put 8 guys in the box to stop the run, because they stopped the run against Green Bay with 2 deep safeties, and if they can do that against Green Bay, then they should be able to do that against us. You know what I mean? And it's going to be a challenge. It'll really be a challenge. They're a very physical and fast team up front. Hopefully, the way of the Lion has been, start out strong and then injury here, injury there, slow down, and then, lose steam toward the end of the season. So I know we play them in Detroit later in the year, but yeah, you're looking at a team that's in first place, and they're pretty confident right now.
Well, we'll have to wait to see what goes on with our team. Obviously, we probably have some changes coming in the store, and we'll see how the team reacts to them. And then we're going to return the week of October 13th with Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call. I want to remind people, don't forget to check out Pete's website at PeteBFootball.com to get his tidbits about pro, college, and high school football. And Pete, I wanted to ask you, speaking of college football, your number 14 Notre Dame takes on number 9 Stanford today. Actually, I think it's the other way around. I think Notre Dame's number 9.
Yeah.
What are you expecting?
I don't know. It's a battle of the eggheads. You got all these, smart guys out there running around, I guess. Stanford is always, even back when I was there, they always played very, very well in South Bend, and it seemed like we had a better time with them out there in California. So, I don't know. We'll see. It's gonna be an interesting game. I don't follow the X's and O's of college like I do the NFL. But I'll be paying attention and watching, and with Notre Dame at the quarterback, it starts and stops with him, and it'll be fun to just kind of relax and turn the brain off and just have fun watching the game instead of having to worry about who's doing what and where.
Yeah, but you talk about the smart guys at Stanford. You always told me you were a smart guy from Notre Dame. What's up?
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. Proof's in the pudding, right? We'll see.
Absolutely. So. Well, until next week, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. Everybody enjoy your weekend of football.